James Hillman, one of the deepest thinkers in modern psychology, revealed something that most people are not ready to hear. You are not your ego. You are not your past. You are not even what you believe about yourself. Your soul does not want you to improve yourself. It wants you to accept yourself. And as long as you keep striving to be someone ideal, you will remain distant from your true potency. Today, I will guide you on a journey that few have the courage to take. We will unmask this trap of the ideal self. We will reveal why that quest for self-improvement is actually pulling you away from yourself. And when you understand what Hillman discovered, you will finally see the path to living as a living work of art, breathing your own multiplicity. And on that day, my friend, the weight you have carried for years will begin to lift from your shoulders. From a very early age, almost all of us were taught to believe that there is a fixed self inside us. A kind of central, solid, unchanging identity that defines who we truly are. This self would be responsible for all our choices, thoughts, and behaviors. It seems comforting to imagine there is a secure anchor amid the chaos of life. But in practice, this idea became an invisible prison, because when someone believes they are only one version of themselves, they begin to live inside a small psychic room, afraid to step through the doors and windows that life offers each day. James Hillman warns us about this trap. He says that the fixed self is an invention of the ego, desperate for control and security. But the soul does not work that way. The soul is dynamic, multifaceted, full of nuances that change with time, encounters, and experiences. When a person tries to fit into a single mold, they start to amputate living parts of themselves. Desires are suffocated, passions are ignored, curiosities are silenced, all in the name of maintaining a coherent image of the self. You can see how this appears in everyday life. The professional who believes they are only their career and collapses when they lose their job. The mother who believes her sole identity is motherhood and feels empty when her children grow up. The young person who defines themselves by a label and freezes at the idea of changing direction. Identity imprisonment creates deep anxiety because any movement outside the constructed identity seems like a threat of psychological death, and the price for that is far too high. Hillman proposes a radical way out of this trap. He invites us to abandon the idea of a fixed self and embrace our internal multiplicity. We are not a single piece. We are a living mosaic full of internal characters that need space to express themselves. When we recognize that multiplicity, the soul breathes. Shifts in interest stop feeling like crises and start feeling like natural dances of the psyche. Each new phase of life becomes an expansion, not a betrayal of the old self. But breaking with the fantasy of the fixed self requires courage, because it means letting go of control, relinquishing the need to always be consistent, allowing yourself to contradict what once seemed unquestionable. It often means hearing that inner voice saying, "I am no longer who I was," and that is okay. This act of renewal is the very breath of the soul, and while the ego screams for stability, the soul invites you to the flow. Now, from this point forward, we begin to approach one of Hillman's most revolutionary concepts. If we are not a fixed self, then what are we? This is where the powerful notion of personification comes in, where the soul does not limit itself to a single identity, but embodies multiple psychic roles that bring color and depth to existence. Hillman hands us a powerful key to understanding the soul. He calls it personification. Unlike the common view in which we seek a single true self, he asserts that each one of us is actually inhabited by a multiplicity of psychic characters. We are not a centralized self, we are an internal theater company. Every day, different characters enter and leave the stage. There is the caregiver, the warrior, the dreamer, the rebel, the sage, the lover. They all live within us, and each one has something to offer. The problem arises when we try to expel these characters, believing we must always be the same. Society demands consistency. Since childhood, we hear phrases like, "Choose who you want to be," and so we begin to build a rigid identity that leaves many of these characters locked behind the scenes. But they do not disappear. When repressed, they end up manifesting in distorted ways. Anxiety, frustration, existential crises. They are the cries of those suffocated characters asking to be heard. Think of an artist who represses their creative vein to maintain a supposedly safer career, or an executive who hides their sensitive side to preserve an image of strength, or that person who has always been the pillar of the family, but carries a deep exhaustion from never allowing themselves to falter. All are examples of internal characters silenced in the name of a single ideal of who one should be. And the more this internal conflict grows, the sicker the soul becomes. Hillman's proposal is not to eliminate conflict, but to welcome multiplicity, to allow the different characters to express their needs and talents. It is not about being inconsistent, but about being whole, about understanding that it is healthy to be strong in some moments and vulnerable in others, to be serious one day and playful the next, to be practical in some phases of life and completely passionate in others. The soul asks for space for these internal dances. When we embrace this view, rigidity gives way to a new lightness. There is no longer the obligation to maintain a single mask. A kind of emotional flexibility emerges that allows one to transition through different roles without guilt. The entrepreneur can also be the poet. The mother can also be the adventurer. The sage can afford at times to be the learner. It is in this movement that the soul finds its true relief. And if now you begin to perceive this inner richness, prepare yourself, because there is an even deeper universe within the soul. A living stage where images, archetypes, and mysterious forces manifest in every aspect of life. And it is precisely on this fascinating stage that we will dive next. When Hillman speaks of the soul, he invites us to see a constantly moving stage. Not an empty space, but a living scene inhabited by images, archetypes, and invisible forces that operate within us all the time. Every thought, desire, dream, or conflict does not arise from nothing. They are expressions of these internal forces moving in symbolic forms. The soul does not think in abstract concepts. It speaks through images, and every image that emerges carries with it a story, an impulse, a possibility of transformation. Consider, for example, moments in your life when you felt the call of courage. Perhaps it was an archetypal force, like the warrior asking for passage. At other times, a desire for withdrawal, silence, and introspection. Here, it might have been the hermit of your psyche manifesting, or when a sweeping passion arises, the energy of Aphrodite dancing within you. These are not simple emotional states. They are living embodiments of archetypes moving through us. The beauty of this vision is realizing that these archetypes are not problems to be solved, but energies to be recognized. When we ignore these manifestations, they do not vanish. They become distorted, creating symptoms, anguish, and unconscious repetitions. How many people live trapped in patterns they do not understand, precisely because they do not listen to the forces behind their choices? They are loves that always end the same way, fears that insist on returning, desires that never cease. Hillman teaches us that the path is not to control these forces, but to engage in dialogue with them, to allow the soul to show us what it wants to be lived. It is like an internal theater where, instead of trying to silence the characters, the invitation is to listen to what each one has to say. This symbolic listening opens doors to profound understandings of who we are and the cycles we go through. See how this approach can transform even our difficulties. A creative block may not just be a problem, but an invitation from the soul to a new form of expression. Intense jealousy may reveal not only insecurity, but also the presence of a deep desire for belonging and intimacy. Every emotion carries an image, and every image has something to reveal about our psychic moment. Now, upon realizing that the soul operates as that living stage of images and archetypes, we begin to see the danger of a practice many pursue in an attempt to control these forces. The self-improvement discourse, when misunderstood, can become a cruel trap for the development of the soul. In recent years, the personal development narrative has gained an almost religious force. Books, courses, lectures, all promising the perfect path to become your best version. The intention seems good, but there is a subtle trap hidden there, because often that quest does not come from genuine self-love, but from a secret rejection of who you are now. The person is not seeking growth. They are trying to fix something they believe is wrong with their essence. And here is where the trap closes. Hillman warns emphatically. When we pursue an ideal self, we create within ourselves a tyrannical figure, a model of perfection so unattainable that it judges us all the time. It is not enough to be good. You must be perfect. It is not enough to improve. You must be extraordinary. This ideal self does not allow rest or acceptance, and the more we approach its demands, the more it raises the bar. It is a race where the finish line always recedes. See how this shows up in practice. The person who is trapped in endless diets, never satisfied with their body. The professional who never allows themselves to celebrate achievements because they always believe they could have done better. The parent who constantly feels guilty for not being the model they idealized. In the name of being the best version, many end up falling ill quietly, consumed by the anguish of never being good enough. The cruelest thing is that this obsession with constant improvement does not allow the embrace of our own shadows. Hillman reminds us that the soul does not want to be perfect, it wants to be whole. And being whole also means giving space to imperfections, to mistakes, to the natural limits of the human condition. It is in the embrace of these parts that the soul finds relief and truly transforms. When we accept that this ideal self does not exist, we open an internal space of rest and gentleness. The quest ceases to be for an unattainable state and becomes a path of deepening. We begin to listen to our internal images with curiosity, not with judgment. We live our cycles with more compassion, understanding that not every challenge demands overcoming. Sometimes true growth is simply sustaining what is. And it is precisely from this point of surrender that a new invitation arises. If the soul does not want to be perfected but embodied, then we need to learn to listen to these inner images, the dreams, the symbols, the desires that arise in silence and offer precious clues about what the soul really wants to live. The soul does not speak in direct phrases. It does not send notes explaining what it desires. Instead, it whispers through images, metaphors, symbols, and desires that spring from within. We must learn to listen to that more subtle language. Dreams are one of its favorite channels. In dreams, the soul stages small nocturnal plays using characters, settings, and situations that at first glance may seem confusing but carry precious messages. Each dream symbol is an entry point to what the soul is trying to show. Hillman always stressed that we should not try to translate dreams into rigid formulas. A lion in a dream may mean strength for one person, fear for another, desire for a third. What matters is not finding a single meaning, but engaging in dialogue with the image, asking yourself what that symbol awakens, what it wants to say in that moment of life. That listening demands curiosity, patience, and an open mind, capable of embracing the multiple possibilities the soul presents. Besides dreams, desires are also important messengers, not impulsive or superficial desires, but those that persist over time. The desire to create something, to explore a new field, to reconnect with forgotten aspects of oneself. These persistent desires are clear signs of internal images asking for embodiment. Ignoring them often generates frustration and a sense of emptiness. Following them, on the other hand, can open surprising paths to realization and depth. Notice how many people fall ill precisely because they silence their authentic desires in the name of external expectations. The woman who always wanted to study art but chose a safe path in law. The man who dreamed of traveling the world but yielded to family pressure for stability. Years later, they feel an inexplicable void. These are internal images knocking on the door, reminding us they are alive and waiting to be heard. Listening to those inner images does not require grand rituals. Often a little more silence, presence, and honesty with oneself is enough. Walking in nature, writing in a journal, meditating, paying attention to your dreams. These small gestures open space for the soul to manifest. The question is not what I should do with my life, but what my soul is trying to live through me right now. And it is precisely at this point of surrender and listening that a new way of walking through life is born. A way where we do not seek to improve ourselves, but to fully embody the images that inhabit our psyche. When Hillman speaks of living poetically, he is not suggesting that we all become poets in the classical sense of the word. What he proposes is a mode of living where each gesture, each choice, and each moment is laden with presence and meaning. It is not about trying to fix yourself, but about giving form and body to the internal images that want to come alive through us. It is stepping out of the logic of self-improvement and into the field of embodiment. It is no longer about who you should be, but about what your soul wants to live now. Living poetically is perceiving the symbolism that permeates even the simplest moments. Preparing breakfast with delicacy, caring for a plant, writing a note, looking into someone's eyes with total attention. These small actions, when done with soul, transform the everyday into something filled with beauty and depth. Life ceases to be a sequence of tasks and becomes a ritual where each detail carries weight and intention. This way of living also demands active listening to our own internal cycles. There are moments of expansion when images call for action, creation, movement, and there are moments of retreat when the call is for silence, for inner care, for diving into the shadows. Living poetically is honoring those rhythms without the rush of someone who always needs to produce or perform. It is accepting that the winter of the soul is as sacred as its spring. See how this manifests in people who carry this art without even realizing it. The woman who turns tidying her home into a space of contemplation and affection. The man who transforms a simple lunch into a feast for the senses. The artist who paints not to sell but to give expression to the image inhabiting them. All live poetically because they allow their internal images to find concrete form in the outer world. Hillman teaches us that living poetically does not require grand external transformations. It does require, yes, a shift in perspective. When we abandon the obsession with self-improvement and begin to ask ourselves what our images want to live, life gains another texture. We no longer seek to be someone better. We seek to be someone whole, embodied, present in what we do. And it is precisely there that true transformation begins to occur effortlessly. But even after grasping this art of living poetically, there is still a deeper call. A call that invites us to abandon the perfection project and finally see ourselves as living works of art in constant creation. Now we reach the heart of Hillman's invitation. He proposes something radically different from everything modern success discourse preaches. We are not here to build a perfection project. We are here to live as works of art. And what is a work of art if not a unique composition, imperfect, full of nuances, shadows, and lights that coexist in mysterious harmony? The artist does not seek to correct the canvas until it is perfect. They allow the creation itself to show its way. Living as a work of art is accepting that life does not need to follow a logical, linear script. It is allowing the unexpected, the contradictory, and the mysterious to compose the landscape of our existence. Each mistake, each success, each pain, and each ecstasy are brushstrokes that build our living image in the world. The soul does not want perfection. It wants expression. It wants to feel that each fragment of us has a legitimate place on the canvas of life. Notice how the most impactful works of art in the world are not those that obey rigid rules, but those that bear the mark of the artist in their totality. So it is with the soul. When we try to follow a manual on how we should be, we lose contact with the genuine pulse of our existence. But when we surrender to life's creative flow, each experience becomes an authentic stroke in our personal work. Hillman shows us that the true meaning of individuation is not to become an idealized model, but to embody one's own internal multiplicity with courage and beauty. It is not about building a perfect image for the world, but about allowing the world to see the living dance of our internal images expressing themselves in each phase, each choice, each silence, and each movement. Living as a work of art also means assuming responsibility for one's own creation. There is no victim mode here. The artist accepts the risks, the stumbles, and the deviations as part of the process. So too is the soul. We are called to look at ourselves with honesty and ask at every moment which images need to gain space now, and by doing so, even in the most difficult moments, we feel the soul breathing and life gaining color. And it is precisely now, after traversing this entire journey, that we can look with new eyes at everything we were taught about who we are. Because perhaps, my friend, you have never been who you thought you were. And that realization, instead of being a shock, can be the beginning of your greatest liberation. Now I ask you with all sincerity, how many versions of yourself have you suffocated, trying to be that ideal person the world expected? How many times have you ignored a desire, silenced a passion, or stifled an inner voice just to maintain the image of who you should be? The truth is that as long as you try to uphold that mask of perfection, you will continue carrying that fatigue you feel but cannot explain. But here is the good news. You no longer have to live in that prison. From today on, you can begin to listen to the images that live within you. You can give space to your legitimate desires. You can embody your soul with all its complexity without needing to justify yourself. Your life is not a project of improvement. It is a work of art in constant creation. And only you can decide what to put on that canvas from now on. Now tell me in the comments, which character of your soul do you feel needs to finally step onto the stage? Which internal image has been knocking on your door for years, and you still have not had the courage to live? I want to know, because your story may inspire other people who are also seeking this liberation. And if you want to keep diving into these knowledges that nobody else dares to tell you, subscribe to the channel now. Activate the bell, because here we go far beyond the obvious. Your journey of soul embodiment is only beginning, and I want to walk with you in this process.